Hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Game Changers, where we talk to some of your favorite sports personalities about their journey into their profession. I'm your host, Dan Harris. You can find me on Twitter at DanHarris80. Last week, we talked to Brad Evans about his journey from being a school teacher into basically one of the first people really to make a mark in the fantasy sports industry. Today, we're talking to somebody a little different, somebody with a little more hair, somebody who loves Blake Jarwin a little more, and somebody whose journey is vastly different than Brad's, for what I understand. That is Mike Wright of the Fantasy Footballers. You can find him on Twitter at FFHitman. Mike, thanks for joining me. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. I take issue with the part of a little more hair than Brad Evans. I have full luscious locks compared to Baldy McBaldster over there.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm trying not to insult too many of our
Brad would love it. Brad would retweet it.
It's fair. All right. Well, I tell you what, when this comes out on Twitter, I will tweet the fact of the specific comment that you've made about his hair, and he'll probably love it. Well, Brad was a great guest. But speaking of that, speaking of your hair, I want to know, what is your haircut situation right now, given because I'll tell you what mine is. Legitimately, it's not a joke. I wake up in the morning, I go into my bathroom, into the mirror, and I just randomly cut spots that look out of place. I assume that's kind of like how Michelangelo did the David, right? He was just like, let me just chip away at anything that didn't look like a dude standing there in perfect form. That's kind of what I do with my hair. Randomly just cut spots. It's working. I look not terrible. So what's your situation?
There are, I mean, the story, the lore goes, that's how Rachel, the Rachel haircut started. I'm talking about Jennifer Aniston playing Rachel in Friends. Like, I have read that the way she got that signature haircut is she would just like randomly cut at pieces of her hair. But my story is I put a hat on, as you can see in the video.
Yes.
Unveiling the hair here a little bit. The situation is a little more under control. The wife gave her best attempt at a fade to shave the sides, and look, she did actually a pretty good job. More so for so I just don't feel just terrible with my hair growing out and feeling like a chia pet, just like a fuzzy teddy bear. So I had her bring the sides in, but I'm fine wearing a hat every day if I need to, and right now I need to.
I'm much more concerned about my kid. Like, my son has the full-on afro going at this point. And now you're in Arizona. We're in the Arctic of New Hampshire, so it's still cold here. But once that heat comes, the kid's
it's cold there,
dude. It's legit. It snowed 2 days ago.
Dude, we're swimming.
Yeah. Well, I tell you what, party at your house then. Okay, I'll be right there. I'll be over in like 4 months. Okay, I'll head out there and it'll be
sounds
fun.
Good.
All right. I do want to tell you, you're the second guest on the podcast, and I want to talk about your journey. I want to be honest with you and tell you the first time I knew the name Mike Wright, I started working for FantasyPros, contributing to them at all, just on a part-time basis on their news desk, writing some articles in March of 2016. So I predated Mike Tagliere, who's now, he and Bobby are the co-hosts of the Fantasy Football Podcast. I was driving into work one day, and I was listening to an episode. It was one of Mike's early episodes, and I was absolutely hysterically laughing the entire ride. And I was like, oh my God, that was a great podcast. And I legitimately was like, who is this guest with the voice of an angel who's making me nearly drive off the road? And I asked, the guy, who kind of supervised me. I was like, who is that? He's like, oh, that's, Mike Wright of the Footballers. And actually, he mentioned something that you originally wrote for FantasyPros, right?
I did.
Like, back in the early days, right?
Yeah, I was one of the launch victims, for lack of a better word. No. When they started their whole news desk thing, I applied. I got accepted. I mean, it was actually like, it was really big for me. I fantasy sports was a real true passion of mine, and this was like, hey, maybe who knows what's going to happen in my life. I might as well try and do this thing on the side. So I would do some blurbs for FantasyPros. Blaine was my contact, and I just kept poking him, just kept trying to keep my name on the top of the stack of saying, hey, if you got any more responsibilities. So eventually I don't know what the hierarchy is now for your news desk, but that back then when they were trying to figure it all out, I got put in charge of a division to make sure that certain things are getting talked about. You know, these teams. Eventually, I took on someone else's division because they left. So I was doing a whole bunch of blurb writing for FantasyPros, and then eventually they let me write a couple articles as well. So, yeah, I guess my very, very first published piece of any kind for fantasy football was on FantasyPros.
Sweet. So I will personally take credit then for all your success. Oddly enough, that's nearly an identical story to how I got my start as well. Started contributing to news desk, writing articles, talking to Blaine, who I now get to boss around. So pretty funny actually that it was. But let's go before then, and let's move back. One of the things I've kind of realized in talking to a bunch of people about how they got their start is that not everybody was a huge football fan necessarily growing up. I mean, have you always been like a diehard? You're from Arizona too, right?
Sure,
I mean, so you've been a Cardinals fan?
Yeah, I'm an Arizona native, and no, I wasn't always a diehard football fan because one, we didn't have a football team at the very beginning of my life. I think the Cardinals came, like later 80s. I was born in 83, and they stunk for a really, really long time. The situation at the top of the team was not great. They played outdoors in a college stadium when it was 1,000 degrees, and they were really, really bad. So, and you know who was great? The Phoenix Suns. So I was all in on basketball. I loved the Suns. I had 2 eras with them. The Barkley era, I kind of fell out of basketball. Then Mike D'Antoni and Steve Nash, they pulled me right back in. I didn't miss a single game. And the way I really got into football was the announcement of the Cardinals are building a new stadium. The way to secure a good seat in the new stadium, you got to have season tickets at the old stadium for a couple years. That was going to get, of course, the better pick. So my pops wanted tickets. Like my dad grew up in Minnesota, so he was now a Cardinal fan, but he grew up a diehard Minnesota Vikings fan. So that's like his second team. It's also my second team by proxy. But anyway, so he buys the season tickets. We start going to games. It's miserable. It's so hot.
So hot. God, I can't even imagine.
You're sitting on metal bleachers. They're bad. They don't win. And eventually you had a couple winning games. I was at the game. I don't know how many people remember it. Like it was a big one for Arizona. Funny enough, they were playing the Minnesota Vikings. The Cardinals were bad. The Vikings were good. But they had to win this game to get into the playoffs. And the Cardinals threw a Hail Mary at the last second to beat the Vikings. And like I was at that game. And so eventually the new stadium gets built. We get Kurt Warner. Things turn around. And that's when I really, really started getting into football and then the fantasy side of it as well. Because I was along with basketball, I was a pretty diehard fantasy basketball player as well.
Okay, so you didn't like graduate from high school or college or anything thinking I'm gonna in some capacity fantasy football, regular football, thinking that you're gonna cover football, right? That's not what your path was.
I was gonna be a gigantic rock star. I was going to play stadiums and tour the world. That was planned.
Did you? Did you do any of that? Do you tour the world?
No. Well, I've been to a couple places.
All right.
But no.
Do you play like music shows when you go there, or you just mean for fun?
No, like just for fun. But I've done some touring. I've done plenty of things involved in music. That was really what I thought I was going to do coming out of high school. And then college was I went to college to make video games. Quickly learned that I'm not as good at the art side as the people who are professionals. Like I will never be as good as them. So I went audio. So the second half plan turned into I'm going to make sound effects and music for video games. So I did that for quite a while before getting into fantasy or professional fantasy.
Okay. All right. So then let's keep going then. So you're on that path. That's what you're going to do essentially with your career. So is this something where you meet Jason and Andy, and that's what sort of gets you into it? Or were
Yep.
you sort of, yeah, is that how it started?
Yep, that's how it started. So I graduate I get my my bachelor's. Now I'm looking for a job. I go to this small game meeting. It's IGDA, International Game Designer Association, I think. Anyway, so it's just like a big group for people who make video games, and they have small pockets. Well, we had one in Phoenix, and Jason was in charge. He was a co-owner of actually a very successful video game business that they were focused on Facebook video games at the time, because this was during Farmville and all of those whatever it was, Mob Wars, Mafia Wars, I don't know. But you everyone who was on Facebook knows what I'm talking about in that era. It was insane. You're getting spammed all the time. But so they were partially responsible for some of that.
Oh, Jason. All right, yeah.
But anyways, so they he kind of he's the guest speaker trying to rally the troops, saying this is what we're doing. And I approach him at the end, say, "Hey man, I just graduated. I do audio, and here's my card." And it just so happened they were making a game called Miscrits, and that game was a monster collection type of a game, so like a Pokemon, but it'll be on Facebook, and they need a whole bunch of audio and music. So right place, right time, and they hired me, and I worked for that company for 7 years, I think.
Okay. And so where does the fantasy football come in?
So the fantasy football comes in because that's what we actually cared about inside the office. I mean, it's what we talked about nonstop.
Sure.
The league of record that we reference frequently on the podcast, that got its start mostly inside of the game company, where the league is full. It's I don't know, 60 or 70% of the people in the league are people who worked in that office. And it was a 10-team league. The company was expanding, and they knew they needed to get a couple more people into the league, so they expanded to 12. That's how I got in, and one of my other artist buddies at the company. So they let me in. I came in. I took over. I dominated. I won. I won two championships. I was 2 championships in the first 4 years in my league, but that's what we would talk about. Like, that's what the real passion was. And this league was it's wild, man. That this league has no money. There's never been money on the line, and I've never wanted to win or keep winning a league as much as I want to win this one. Like, I've been in big money leagues, and it's, I don't know. You great. I got $500 at the end of the season. That comes and goes. But the glory of winning this league and how much everyone cares about winning and losing, the value of that, man, you can't measure it, because when you win, you get to lord it over these people for a full year, and it hurts. It hurts when you rub it in that you are the champion of this league. Anyways, so this league, we just try and take it at least a step every year to make it better and better. It's always a live draft in person. We get to the point where we have tables set up. We bring in another one of our buddies, and he's Roger Goodell. We're handing all our picks in on an index card, and he's reading them. Yep. Everyone's got banners. Everyone's got T-shirts. And one year, we decide, Andy and I, hey, let's do a podcast. Let's do a podcast for this league, specifically for these 12 people. We'll take one lunch every week, and we'll just get on microphones. We'll have fun. We'll talk crap. Do what you do for fantasy football. So we're doing that. Everybody is really enjoying it. We have a section of the show called the Tradosaurus Rex, and people would legitimately make trades hoping that they got to be featured on this stupid podcast that's for 10 people. But that's
to be clear, this isn't going anywhere,
no,
right? This is legitimately just for your league mates.
This is legit just for our league mates, but that's how much we care about winning this league. Like, You want to be featured on the league's podcast. So we're ridiculous moronic human beings.
Yes.
But anyways, so we get to a point of, well, what if we tried to do a real podcast that is going to be forward facing? It's not just for the league. It's going to go out to the public. So Andy and I form the Fantasy Footballers, and we take one lunch every week and record our version of the show. The show was much different then. We sucked. I was actually the host of the show, which is really funny for people to learn about because Andy is the host, and Andy's a sensational host. But at the time, I had more experience on microphone because I had done, like music. I was a front man for a band, so I just was more comfortable at the time in front of a microphone. Thankfully, we made the switch because Andy's a much better host than I am. But so we're making that. The show is terrible. Nobody is listening to it. Eventually, we talk to Jason, and because Jason is our boss, and he's like, guys, what? The other show was so much fun. The show that's for the league and this show, the Footballers, it's not fun. And so it's basically what we figured out is happening is we're trying to emulate other people. We're having to be the sports guy. We're having to be what people expect to hear on the radio, and that's just not who we were as personalities. So we were basically we were restricting ourselves. We were holding back. And once Jason gave us that comment, it was, yeah, you're right, man. We're not suit and tie guys. Like, let's be the guys that we are on the league podcast for the Footballers. So we start improving a little bit. Still nobody's listening, but we at least feel like the show's getting better. Then, unfortunately, Facebook Gaming and that company starts to take a turn for the worst. You can read the tea leaves that this thing is about to shut down. I actually got laid off twice by the company, but anyways. So eventually the final bell tolls on the company, and all of us are, oh crap, what are we going to do for work now? Andy and Jason went to school to become realtors. I was doing all music things. I was trying to start a beard company, like a beard oil company, and do some other things. But we all decided, hey, or Andy and I decided, I should say, hey, we have nothing to lose. Let's try and keep the podcast going. And then it was, let's bring Jason in, because Jason is one of the smartest business people I've ever met in my life, as well as Andy is. But it was like, let's bring another mind in. Jason's background is in comedy. It's in improv. Like, he is hilarious. He is legitimately hilarious and makes me laugh all the time. Let's bring him in. Let's get another voice in. And so there was the three of us. We start going. We make the decision. Should we relaunch the podcast now? And we're talking about, this is in February, when, of course, football is peaking in February.
Sure.
No, it was
where everybody's really just gunning for some content.
Yeah, it's redraft podcasts in February at that time. That's what people really wanted. Do we launch now, or do we actually launch in June when training camp is going? And it was, no, man, let's get it going. Let's see what happens. So we do that, and listeners start trickling in, and then it was another, right place, right time. We just happened to, we just got into podcasting right before another podcast boom explodes. Fantasy football took a huge step, and we just happened to be there and really connected with listeners. So that summer, we saw the listenership really hit a hockey stick curve and just spike up, and to the point of, guys, I think that we can turn this into a real job if we really go for it. Commit to 5 shows a week in August, like the real big guys. I think we can make it happen, and haven't looked back since. And now we're going into our 6th season, I think.
And so that was all from the time that you guys really went for it in February to the time in August where you just said, okay, this is it. We're all in. We're pushing all our chips in.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's a unbelievable blessing the way that it worked out for us, because I know there's like I have industry friends who are out there that they've been grinding for years, man, and our success was pretty overnight.
Yeah. So I guess let me ask a couple of things. First of all, when you were doing the podcasting, was there any writing going on? Because now you guys obviously, you're known for the podcast, of course, but you've got plenty of writers who work for your company. You put a lot of written stuff. Were you just podcasting at that time?
I was still doing the FantasyPros stuff at that time,
Okay.
if I remember right. So I mean, I'm blurbing and doing a couple articles, but I can write. Like I consider myself a pretty solid and decent writer. It's not my medium. I am a musician. I am an audio person. I would much rather sit and have a conversation with somebody over the podcast than sit down and crank out a 3,000 word article. Like, and there's people, that's what they do. Like, that's in their blood. It's just not in mine.
Yeah. Okay. So if you hadn't gone full time, I mean, given the pace, do you think you guys would have been able to, what would the pacing have been like, do you think, if you didn't? It's a big risk, Mike, which you're acknowledging here,
Yes.
to basically go solo. And one of the real reasons, which I'll ask you about in a second, you are not affiliated with a big site where you jump on, you decide this is what we're going to do. We're going to go for it. With this name, we have sort of this backing. You guys are three guys who are doing your thing and doing it really well, and just decide we're going to go for this and we're going to go for it full time. That's a tough thing for a lot of people to do. Could you have sustained that pace if you didn't push all your chips in at the time? I mean, would it have been sustainable for you guys to do this, still trying to grind it out on the side and a regular job without pushing all your chips in?
Man, I probably not. Like the way that we went about it. Well, I'll say first off, one of the things that we do with part of the success that came was we treated the show as a business immediately. This wasn't. It wasn't just, hey guys, let's do a fantasy football podcast. It was, let's start a fantasy football business, and our primary good, so to speak, the primary consumable will be the podcast. And we focused so much on the podcast. It's interesting for people now who are getting into the podcast space as far as just a listenership, because back when we started, there wasn't nearly the amount of fantasy football podcasts there are today, but the ones back then, it was rough, man. Right? You had ESPN, who they had a quality product, real high quality audio. The guys at CBS, also high quality audio, good show.
Yep.
But other than those two shows, it was a total crapshoot of people putting out products where the information is good, but I can't listen to this. This is unbelievably boring, man. Like it's people who shouldn't be. They're writers. They're writers trying to force themselves into a podcast, or their audio quality. Like the one I always go back to is, it sounds like it's like a lawnmower running in a telephone booth where you just every fourth word, I can't make out what you're saying because you guys didn't take any time to learn the craft of audio. Or you had just knuckleheads out there you were like, I don't believe anything that this person is saying. This is terrible advice. So we, at the very beginning, we kind of established the 3 guidelines for our show. We're going to make sure that the podcast is always high level production, at the highest it could possibly be. My background is in audio, so I knew how to do all of these things. I was already comfortable with microphones, getting all that set up, getting set up in a digital workstation, making sure the compression of our files is optimized so it doesn't sound like crap, but it's also not this 150 megabyte file, because this is also 6 years ago when you were capped at how much data you could stream. So like that was that was a section of the business that I took on. Then we needed to make sure that we were always giving out good information, we're well researched, and we're entertaining. So it was the combination of these three things. We always refer to it as these are the three pillars of the show. And I believe because we had those three pillars and we were so focused on the three pillars, that's why when listeners come into the show, they stick with us. They build a connection with who we are as guys and just, again, morons. But they know that we know what we're talking about, and we're entertaining them, and we're giving them a high quality production as well.
So I really have one more question, and it builds off what you just said before we get into the final segment of the Blitz, which is my favorite. But here's the deal.
Sure.
You are basically probably an inspiration to the vast majority of people who are out there who want to get into the business, right? Because in the end, what you guys were three friends, you know, essentially, who basically had something that worked and started it all on your own, and it blossomed into this fantastic business, and people love you and you guys are great. But, and I want to put you on the spot here because, I mean, it's hard if the answer to this question is no, and it would be hard to say that, but is what you guys did legitimately repeatable? Because I ask it because of this. No, I'm not kidding, because you mentioned three things. Okay. Number one, you guys are all highly, highly entertaining. Highly entertaining. That's not necessarily something that you can, I mean, you can work on it, obviously, and I'm sure your podcast has changed since the early days and stuff like that. Of course, you can work on it. But naturally speaking, you mentioned Jason kind of has a background in comedy. You know what I mean? You guys are funny. Number two, you guys are very accurate. You are always, you know, FantasyPros measures the accuracy leaders. All three of you are always, you know, at worst in the top 20 year in and year out. You guys really know your stuff. And third, as you mentioned, you kind of had a background in making sure that the audio quality was good. There are a lot of Joes on the street right now who have a lot of fantasy football knowledge, you know, and really want to break into the industry. Do you think, and especially now where it, you know, the market is more saturated than when you guys came in, especially the podcast, is it repeatable? Do you think, are there people out there who could follow this really, really, you know, narrow path? You guys kind of threaded the needle with this thing because, again, you built it from the ground up. Is it something that's sustainable? Or I mean, because again, the reason I really wanted to do this podcast is because you asked, by the way, earlier, I don't know what happens. I run the news desk now on FantasyPros.
All right.
So I get a lot of people, you know, who are just starting out. I just, you know, I talk to them on email. I give them advice about what necessarily to do. But I'm wondering, do you think the model you guys use is replicable? I mean, can people do it that way now where fantasy football is at this stage?
Sure. I would say it's possible, but it's going to be way harder. One, because, look, if you're going to try and be on the top, the fantasy footballer is going to have to knock you down.
I love it. Out to kill.
But yeah, I'm joking about that.
Obviously.
But like I said, when we really took off, it wasn't just us getting lucky at the timing of this fantasy football hitting this turbo button of jumping fully mainstream, because, you know, it's wild to look at the growth of just fantasy sports overall and how exponentially they have grown. And the biggest factor was getting online. And because fantasy sports used to be, you write things down, you go to a newspaper, you track box scores that way, you manually add up all the points. But now, like, the big thing was ESPN, Yahoo, these people building infrastructure so that you could play online. And just about 6 years ago, there was just this inflection point where I think people finally were all in to it. Like, as in, when you're in the office, like Joe and Jane Doe, just, yeah, sure, I can jump on. It's not hard. There is no difficulty for me to get on. So the timing of fantasy sports hitting this explosion point, as well as podcasting, and the fact that the fantasy space had not been completely saturated, or I should say oversaturated. I don't know the right way to phrase it. But there were writers everywhere. There weren't excellent podcasts everywhere. It's a lot more difficult now because people are stepping up their game when it comes to podcasting. People have figured out, oh, I do need to worry about my audio quality. I do need to worry about being entertaining as well as giving out good information. So I won't say it's not impossible, of course, because the people come from nowhere. Like you guys just stole one of our people.
That's right. Stole him right off. Kyle Yates, my man.
And it's again, I'm joking. We're like, I'm very, very happy for Kyle. Like that, it brings a sense of pride that somebody who we kind of gave Kyle his first shot at getting a bigger platform to write, and Kyle's journey from unknown to getting a shot to write for us to being full time on the FantasyPros podcast, that was rapid, man.
Yeah.
His ascent was similar to ours, where like there's outlets out there. To do it all completely by yourself, it's gonna be a lot harder than when we got our start. But I won't say it's impossible.
Yeah, I really appreciate that honesty, Mike, because I feel like, that's the truth. I think you guys, I don't want to say it's an anomaly, because you guys were doing it.
It's fine, man. You could.
No,
because the thing is about an anomaly is because I don't feel like if they want to put that label, I don't believe it discredits the show. The show was, I always think about the Eminem song from 8 Mile where he's like, you have your one shot.
Lose yourself. Lose yourself.
Exactly. Oh, that song. Back when I would play live, I would listen to that show to get pumped up. But I listened to it
before every single law school exam. That is not a joke.
There you go, man.
If you can see me on YouTube and you look at me, if you can imagine me walking around a law school campus rapping to Lose Yourself.
Just airboxing?
The most embarrassing sight you could ever possibly see. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But the anomaly was the opportunity. The show was ready. Like we were working very hard, and we had a magic that is hard to replicate because we're three best friends in the same room. Mm-hmm. So the anomaly was the opportunity, but the show was ready. It wasn't when people say, it's impossible. It was the show had been crafted for this moment. And we just, when the moment came, our show was ready, thankfully. So we didn't waste that opportunity.
And to be clear, anomaly was meant as a pure compliment because you guys sort of, for lack of a better way to say it, had such magic and had every part of what you would need to do what you guys did, that it really does strike me as something that's difficult to replicate in today's day and age. So that is, and I know you understood that. It certainly didn't mean it in any way like a positive thing, an incredible thing.
We're all good, my man.
Yeah, all right. Thank you. Good thing. The one thing I'm going to add before we finish up here with the last segment is writing or podcasting for your own league. My first quote unquote article that I ever did was a press conference that I held, a written press conference about how Coach Harris was considering starting then quarterback Joe Webb who was filling in supposed to be for Brett Favre at wide receiver because of a glitch in Yahoo had him wide receiver eligible. And how crazy that decision was, and how I was concerned because it was a Sunday night game or a Monday night game, and Brett Favre had been doubtful earlier in the year and had actually played instead. But it was a fake press conference. And I'm not kidding. I still go back to that article. It's in our Yahoo history as like one of my best ever written pieces. And people joke about it even then. And they were like, you should really think about this. Things like that are a great way just to get things started. I mean, doing a podcast for your own league is insane. Absolutely nuts. And I love that you guys did that. But getting your start, if you really want to sort of dip your toes into the water, if you don't have any other outlet, do that. Do 100%. Something within your own league and get started that way, So I really just wanted to echo that part of what you said.
You have to take reps. No matter what it is. It's to use in a sports analogy, you got to get your reps in. Like our podcast at the beginning, it sucked, man. Like the first time you sit down and talk to someone, try and have a conversation with somebody, but into a microphone, it's a thing you can't explain. It's just different, and you have to get used to it. You got to get those reps. Same with writing. You're gonna suck.
Yeah.
Because guess what? Everybody sucks at some point. No one is just amazing right away. You're gonna suck. Get through that. Get your reps, and then so when the anomaly hits, when the opportunity strikes, you are actually ready. Because you don't you don't want to jump into the opportunity if you're not actually ready, because it's not going to work. You will fail if that happens.
100% agree. So, however you want to get your start out there, honestly, practice it in whatever outlet that you have to do that. Practice it for sure, because that is going to make you better. All right. We're going to have one more segment here, Mike. It's called The Blitz. I'm going to ask you 10 questions. But before we get into that, I want to remind everybody that we are giving away a signed Davante Adams helmet. All you have to do to be entered into the contest is to leave a review for this show on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Send a screenshot of that review to gamechangers@fantasypros.com. That gets you entered into the contest to win the signed Davante Adams helmet. It also helps us get off the ground. As I said, Mike is the second guest. We're going to be doing, a lot more of these. So help get our name out there and possibly win a free Davante Adams signed helmet.
I chuckle over here because if you want to talk about game changing.
Yes.
The reason everyone gives away all this signed stuff now, which is great. Like, I'm all about it. This guy. Like,
what do you mean?
So I'm assuming that's from Pristine Auction.
You are correct.
Yeah. So here's a great story for you. David Johnson becomes a folk hero of the fantasy footballers. A fan points to me on Twitter, says, "Hey, check this out. It's a signed David Johnson jersey." I'm like, "Oh man, I am all over this. I gotta win this." So I go to this website I've never been to. I win a David Johnson jersey. And as I'm checking out, I'm looking at the cost of shipping, and wait a minute. This company's in Phoenix, Arizona. Very interesting. Maybe can I just go pick it up? Awesome. I just saved a whole bunch of money on shipping because this place is 15 minutes away from my house. I go pick up my David Johnson jersey, and I leave a note with the receptionist, say, "Hey, tell the owner I would love to talk to him. I have a pretty successful fantasy football podcast. I think it would be a great place for you guys to market." And the owner eventually calls me back, and we get a great business friendship working. And like before we started giving out Pristine Auction stuff, like people weren't doing this. And now everyone gives out signed autographed memorabilia from Pristine Auction, and I take full credit. I take full responsibility for this transformation in the fantasy space of a great way to engage with your listeners, have them leave you reviews, all these things. And so it's pretty funny when I think back to this chance, this happenstance of me winning a David Johnson jersey and then realizing that company was 15 minutes away from me.
Well, that is awesome. A great story. Pristine Auction is great, by the way. And the fact that we've basically been quarantined, I essentially just spend it like when my kids get crazy with school and start freaking out. I'm like, you know what? If you buckle it up a little bit later on, we'll go on Pristine Auction. My son is a huge sports fan. My 6-year-old. Nice. We buy something. Last time we just bought a bunch of baseball cards. Something, they have everything on there. But second,
and great people who run the company.
Well, I'll take your word for it because I don't live in Arizona, so I've never met them personally. But I will say this. I'm going to let you take credit then for the Davante Adams helmet, but I'm going to take credit for your entire career because you started at FantasyPros and the news desk. So me and FantasyPros.
But I was there before you.
Nah, not really. I've always been there, some way.
What year did you get it going?
That I'm not going to reveal that information. I'm the host, Mike. Okay. Stop trying. No, honestly, you did predate me. March of 2016 was when I applied to Wright for the MLB news desk because I do both. I do MLB and football over here. So that's when I first started, and I quickly rose up the ranks, and now I run the news desk. Which, by the way, has taken leaps and bounds since obviously you got started.
Yes.
Again, we're taking credit for your career, so that's fine. Okay, let's get to the blitz. Let's finish up here, Mike. I've really enjoyed talking to you. Such great information. Your story is fantastic. But now it's time for what I really care about, which is
this is the part I care about too.
Yeah. This is big now. Okay, this is my way to be able to evaluate guests. Okay, I need some way. We're gonna have a lot of guests, a lot of people in the industry. So Brad scored 6 out of 10 here. So this is my way to basically. You've already winning the hair battle, as we know.
Point.
This is the way for me to sort of get into this. Now, one thing before we start, I'm the final arbiter of whether your answer is correct. Okay.
Ooh,
no arguments. No arguments. Okay.
All right.
Arguments. I may deduct points.
Fair is fair.
All right. Let's get started with the blitz.
All right.
If you could instantly develop an expertise in one life skill, what would that be?
Jiu-jitsu.
That's the correct answer, actually. Who should portray you in the TV movie that the Hallmark Channel is inevitably going to make about your life?
Chris Hemsworth.
Oh my gosh. I did not expect you to knock it out of the park. To be fair, I was thinking Steve Buscemi, but I'm going to allow Chris Hemsworth. Look, it's not personal. I honestly think Steve Buscemi should portray everyone in their life story.
He's sensational, but
I'd
prefer to be like real handsome and buff.
No, I get it, but I'm trying to be realistic here. Okay. Number 3, which NFL team suffered the final loss of the 20th century?
Oh.
If you know that, I'm going to assume you're cheating.
I don't know that.
You've got a 1 in 32 chance.
Can I ask this question? Are you the stickler of the end of the 20th century was actually the year 2000 or 1999?
Does that matter to you? Do you know what it is?
No, I'm just stalling for time over here.
Oh, you are. You better not cheat. 1999.
Okay, let's go. Detroit.
That's a great guess because you would assume it was actually the Miami Dolphins who lost 38-31 to my Jets on December 27th, 1999. Shoot. It's all right. If you knew that, I would have assumed you were cheating. Number 4, is a hot dog a sandwich? Simple question.
Yeah, well, the answer is yes.
Oh, God. You know what? That's incorrect. It's no. Hot dog is not a sandwich. I appreciate the answer, but that's no. That's
what
incorrect
is it?
Answer. It's a hot dog. That's it. It's its own separate sort of. Don't argue. Don't argue.
Oh no. I just when people are adamant that they know that it is not a sandwich, I just like to hear. I like to hear the answer.
If it makes you feel better, I was just going to mark you wrong, whatever you said, because I have full control.
You dirty dog.
I'm the worst. All right. What is the best sports movie of all time?
Ooh, the best sports movie of all time is Rookie of the Year.
Oh, Mike, you're killing Rookie of the Year. First of all, you're choosing a baseball movie? That's crazy to me. You're a football guy, right? There's no football movies. Little Giants. I mean, something like that for football. Nothing.
I mean, there are good football movies. Like I love Waterboy. But
yeah,
I mean,
the correct answer, by the way, is Rocky. That's incorrect. Rookie of the Year is not the best sports movie.
That's fine if you like people missing their punches by about 5 feet.
That is true. Okay, and no defense whatsoever in boxing, which a little bizarre, right? Like the defense is blocking it with your face. That's I don't box really, but
strongest
I'm
face wins.
That's not the way you're supposed to do things. This is a tough one. Okay, Mike, which 2020 NFL draft pick was an accomplished weightlifter in high school? And I'm going to say this. It's not going to be, I'll give you a hint. It's not somebody who, like, the first person that's going to come to mind. It's not somebody, when you hear the answer, and maybe you'll get it right, it's not somebody who you are thinking it is going to be.
Okay, well then I don't know, so I'll just take the time to highlight the fact that the Arizona Cardinals were able to draft Isaiah Simmons.
Yes.
At pick
and
number
didn't they
8.
trade for somebody this offseason? Somebody good? DeAndre Hopkins. That's right. That was a nice trade.
I didn't want to bring that up, but
that's all right.
That's a really sore subject. People get real mad when you talk about how good the Arizona Cardinals general manager Bill O'Brien is.
Well, look, I would be jealous, but I'm a Jets fan, so I'm kind of crushing everything, the coaching staff, the team, the history. I've got it all. All right, stop stalling. Which 2020 NFL draft pick was an accomplished weightlifter in high school?
Oh no, I'm sticking with Isaiah Simmons.
Oh, Isaiah Simmons. Oh, I'm sorry. That was your guess. I'm so sorry. I just thought you liked to talk about the Cardinals. No, actually, it was Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts.
Oh,
So shocking, right? Shocking. Have you ever had anyone famous reach out to you about something fantasy related?
uh, depends what you mean by famous, but yes, I'll say yeah.
Okay. You don't want to elaborate on that, by the way. You
Well,
just want
no,
to say yes.
well,
Totally fine.
but like when you're saying famous, like generally you're thinking like a TV or a movie star. But if you're familiar with the Try Guys, I'm actually pretty good online friends now with Ned from the Try Guys, and they're massive, man. They're massive YouTube stars. But I talk to him all the time. He came out to our live show in LA, and he is far more famous than I am.
Okay. That's the correct answer. Don't worry. We're marking that correct.
All right.
If you could live anywhere in the world other than in your current location, where would it be?
San Diego.
That's obviously the correct answer. San Diego rocks. If you were in a 2-on-2 competition to the death with a rival fantasy gang, and the 3 events in this competition were dodgeball, bobsledding, and the ability to sit in a chair without getting up for the longest amount of time, which one of the footballers are you choosing to join your team, Jason or Andy?
Oof. Okay, so it's all 3?
You got all 3. That's the event. You'll have to win 2 out of 3 to win this competition to the death with your rival fantasy gang. Dodgeball, bobsledding, ability to sit in a chair longest without getting up.
As I feel like I would prefer to have Andy for dodgeball.
Sure.
Jason would be excellent, but Andy was the quarterback for our flag football team, and he's got a deadly arm.
Oh.
I feel like Jason would help me with bobsledding though. He's a meaty boy. He's got real strong legs. So I mean, the push off is really important, and he's going to help me there more than Andy would. So it comes down to
who's going to sit longest without getting up.
The problem is we've had Jason injure himself multiple times while sitting. If you listen to the show at all.
The amount of analysis that is going into the answer of this question makes me respect you even more than I already did.
Just a side note, like, so we do a side podcast where it's just comedy. We call it's the Spitballers podcast, and this is kind of what I'm notorious for, is questions that should not be analyzed. Those are my favorite questions to dig into and really get to the bottom of it. So
I wish I asked you more of these. Then we could have had a 4-hour show.
Awesome.
All right,
4. Keep going, man. We can go along with that. So it comes down to the sitting. I believe. Can you fall asleep in the chair?
Sure. You just can't get up.
Okay, then I'm taking Andy.
The ability to not have to go to the bathroom. By the way,
I'll take Andy then, because he is a master chair sleeper.
Okay. All right. I am not only going to mark that correct, but I'm also going to make a note to not ask you those types of questions anymore in your podcast. Okay. Finally, this is a tough one. Okay. You're a music guy, as you mentioned. What musician is first alphabetically by last name? So alphabetically by last name on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. That's a real tough one. If you get this, forget it. I'm just probably going to give you an extra point.
What's funny is a name popped into my head, but there's no way that this guy's on the Walk of Fame, but I'm going to go with it anyways. I will go with Adam Ant.
Ooh, that is unfortunately incorrect. It's Paula Abdul. Straight up, don't tell me. That's what it is.
Yeah.
So look, man, honestly, you got 5 correct, but your answers were so good and thought out, and I kind of.
Wait, so I lost to Brad?
Oh, you did, with the hot dog. The hot dog is sandwich, though. To be fair, it's my own fault. That was probably the right answer. Most people agree hot dog is sandwich. But look, I can't do it. I can't retroactively change the grade. It is 5. You did lose to Brad, but you were still, I mean, you can tell him you're a much better guest. I mean, the amount of thought you gave into the 2-on-2 competition to the death just blows everything else out of the water, regardless of the fact that you have an incredibly interesting story into how you changed the game of fantasy football. So
changed
it. I really appreciate you coming on, Mike. Everybody knows you and everybody knows where they can find you, but just in case there is the rare person lives in Antarctica who doesn't know who you are, tell everybody where they can find more of you and the great work that you guys do.
Sure. You can find all of the Fantasy Footballer stuff, thefantasyfootballers.com, wherever podcasts are listened to, we are on there as well. If you want to follow more of my personal insights, my Twitter and my Instagram handle are the same. They are at FFHitman.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on. Mike, I've got notes for the next time you and I chat or podcast as to the types of questions I'm going to ask.
Excellent.
So it should be less analysis needed on your part.
More nonsense.
Anyway, all right. I really appreciate you coming on. All right, everybody. We will be back next week with another guest. Thanks for listening. Court is adjourned.